Yeah, welcome to our monthly Human Resources Development and Management 101 conversation. Wow, I always can't wait for this moment when we speak to the industry experts, specifically around issues relating to people management or human resources as it is traditionally known. So this show is brought to you by COMETSA Global Online Channels in association with the People Management Institute, the IPM. And we are talking about human resources issues, the current trends, strategies, you name it. We have an expert in the studio today. My colleagues will introduce her to you, but let me introduce them. The CEO of the IPM, Dr. Jerry Gule. Welcome, my brother. George Mutendatamera, the CEO of Wula Unlock Consulting, and our sister Boniwe Tansta, the IPM member who is here to raise issues in the interest of the broader HR fraternity. And I know they feel very well represented by Boniwe, and I can't imagine any of this session without Boniwe. If she's not here, it's as good as having no HR fraternity represented. So I'm glad that she could make it. Yeah, so mine is really is to guide, but also to interject and enjoy myself. I hand over to our colleagues, my co-hosts, to start the conversation with our guest and tell you who she is. Over to you, colleagues.
Good morning, and Andisa, welcome to our program. I will be co-hosting with Boniwe, and they said Dr. Jerry Gule is the IPM man in charge of the Institute. Maybe just to kick off and to start the show, tell us about Cisco, what your role is, what you do there, and then we can start from there.
Certainly, and thank you very much, I think, for the opportunity to come on this platform, I think, to engage on this conversation. So I'm very grateful for that. So my function really is to lead the people function from an Africa perspective. Cisco in Africa is an entity that spans across 31 countries in our patch. And really our role is to partner up with, with our channel, or rather our ecosystem, to ensure that we enable our customers to connectivity, to great technology, and also I think to help our customers to drive a digital strategy. So that, I think, in essence, that's sort of who we are. And really my role is to partner up with our leaders to ensure that, I think, one, I'm keeping the people agenda, the talent agenda at the center of strategy. And also I think for me to translate what that strategy is to actionable people, people items. And so, in a very high level, that really is my role. I think often when I talk about what I do, I always say that I'm a catalyst. I enjoy having conversations. I enjoy, I think, starting and coloring outside of the lines as it relates to HR. The second is that I'm a connector. I love, I think, building bridges between the people agenda and your business strategy. And then lastly, and probably maybe my favorite thing is a storyteller. I enjoy coming on platforms such as this one to come and tell the story, to tell the journey, and I think, to share some of our insights. So let me park there. I've given you quite a bit as an intro.
That's great. That's great to hear, Andisa, and we're very delighted to actually have you here. You're one of the female leaders in Africa that we as young practitioners in the industry looking forward to actually learning from you. And having here is actually quite a great pleasure for our listeners and for COMETSA. So tell me, from a human resources perspective, as you've mentioned that one of your key things is to keeping talent at top of strategy. What are the 2 or 3 things at the moment that you feel that are challenges within your human resources space in your team that you are faced with and that you think that you need to pay more attention to?
Yeah, great question, and thank you for that question, Boniwe. I think there are a couple, and maybe let me highlight some of our big ticket items. I think one, just driving a diversity in terms of talent, and layering and overlaying that with equity. I think for the longest time we've been having these conversations around gender parity, and I think to ensure that as organizations we've got the right representation, from a gender, from a race perspective, but really I think taking in the analytics to understand really where the gaps are and where our blind spots are, and to find remedies for that in the near future. So that's probably one. I think the second one, we're in the space, I think, of talking about the future of work and reskilling and I think repurposing talent, and for us I think it's carving out a journey, and perhaps I see myself playing in the space of being an architect to pathways that lend themselves, I think, for us to redefine what roles are, because of course we know now, I think with the introduction of new technologies, the lifespan of job roles is becoming shorter and shorter, which then begs the question for us in our fraternity: what are we actively doing to create mechanisms to make that shift and to move things forward? And I think for us, as a technology partner, we are pretty much right ahead of that curve. And I think when we recognize that a lot of companies look to us for direction, as people, I think, who keep reinventing the wheel as it comes to technology.
Wow. I wonder if I can interject, if you don't mind, Boniwe. I'm hungry if I may use the word hungry, to take you back. I thought at the beginning we were going to hear who is Andisa. Or am I jumping the gun? I'm wondering.
No.
Maybe if you were just to tell us, before you came to Cisco, who you are and what brought you into HR, and
Certainly.
what made you so eloquent around these issues.
Certainly. So I think I've had a very unorthodox journey into HR. I come from a media space, having trained as a journalist, and I think if I look back to about 15 years ago almost now, I think I took a place in my life where I had to reflect really what I wanted to do from a career perspective. And I think what I've always intrinsically known is that I'm a people person. I enjoy people. So I think whilst I may have a very strategic mind, but at the core of who I am, I'm a nurturer. And HR felt like, the natural and an organic space to be in. And so I've been in this space. I've worked with digital agencies. I've worked in the music business. I've also spent some time in financial services, having worked with the likes of Alexander Forbes, as well as Barclays Capital. And so from my experience perspective, you can already see there's quite a bit of color in terms of the spaces I've moved in. And a lot of that, I think, ties back to what I'd said earlier when I said that, the 3 adjectives I used to describe myself was a catalyst, a connector, and a storyteller. And really, I think for me, my journey, really, I think kind of really tells that story. Outside of work, I'm a mountaineer. I thoroughly enjoy being out in nature and being out in the mountain. I find that space really anchors my spirit. I really, really do. I'm a highly spiritual person, probably less religious, but certainly spiritual, and it connects me to my higher power, and I recognize, I think, the calm and the tranquility that being in a mountain and what that does for my soul. And so that's something I thoroughly enjoy. I look forward to many more adventures outside of the one big adventure that I have done, which was climb Mount Kilimanjaro about 2-3 years ago, and now I'm carving out a training path to go out to the Himalayas, which has been a dream of mine since I was a child.
Wow, wow.
I think just for you mentioning the fact that you're a mountaineer.
So with Cisco, it offers you an opportunity to climb even more bigger mountains, but this time on the professional level.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great.
Bonnie, over to you.
I wanted to ask you that.
Yeah. So, Dr. Jerry, what do you think of what we've been fed so far?
Sorry, just one moment,
Yeah.
George. I think, just hold on, Dr. Jerry Gule. George, I think you're not hearing us. If you can just reconnect back, because you're talking over other colleagues. Sorry about that.
Cool. Just to pick up from there, Andisa, mentioning the fact that you are a mountaineer is actually quite inspiring, and we know the effort and the prep that really has to go and the planning into actually having to summit a mountain. What are those key learnings that you have taken from that mountaineering journey or hobby that you like? What are those key learnings that you actually apply in your life and in your career that also helps you to continue soaring to where you are today?
Sure. Love that question. I think the first thing is the power of collaboration. I think whilst the summit itself is an individual feat, it really takes a great deal of people to help us climb up. So from the team doctors that are that come up on the journey with us to training. My training program involves a myriad of things, right? So from yoga to gaining upper body strength, and I think working on my core. So I've got a separate yoga teacher. I've got running buddies. I would go and do the West Cliff stairs. And I would do just a whole myriad of things. So I think for me, one is the power of collaboration is really, really key. And that's something I take into my professional world. I think that's one. I think two, not being afraid, I think, to push the boundaries. We all really don't know. There isn't a mental template of what the human body can do outside of science and medicine, right? So if you take that off, in the mountain, you really are forced to trust yourself, to trust your instinct. And I take that into boardrooms. I think when I engage with leadership around what it is that I know, but also being comfortable with what I don't know. And the same can be said in a mountain, right? You walk into a new terrain, you've never physically been on it. And so I have to trust my body and trust what my body is responding to and what those responses are, and just how much stimuli there is. And the same can be said about work, right? Especially as HR professionals, right? We're engaging with multiple stakeholders, whether it is line management, whether it's employees, whether it's service providers, right? So the ecosystem itself, if you take that and mirror that into a mountain, for me, it really I can easily draw parallels between those three things. And I think the third one, there's many more. The third one is, I think trusting the process. Trusting the process, and I think accepting that you can make miscalculations along the way, and that's okay. It's okay, because the important part is to take those learnings and to learn and to grow from that, right? So I've never been one to believe that I am above, reproach or above, I think, criticism. And as my Sherpas would tell me and show me in a mountain environment and say, Andy, the last 2 hours, your breathing was X, your climbing was Y, your just body stature, how you walked, these are the things you need to correct if you're going to make it until tomorrow. And the same can be said in a boardroom where I engage with MDs and CEOs who then tell me the things that aren't working. And I think for me to be able to take that criticism and re-engineer it towards solutions that work for the business.
Great, thank you for that.
Pleasure.
Yeah. Well, I Sam, I promised a very delicious stew and meal. That's what we're having today, having Andisa here. I think our audience is really taking it in. But Andisa, I just wanted to ask you. So one of the things that I know you are passionate about is this, what you call digital skills for Africa. Can you just explain a little bit more about that digital skills that you are involved in?
Certainly. So Digital Skills was founded, in fact, a couple of months ago by Clayton Naidu, who is the ex-general manager for Cisco Sub-Saharan Africa, as well as Kathy Smith, who now leads the SAP business. And really, I think the founding members and perhaps the broader team, I think our common purpose and goal, I think, is to accelerate, the adoption of digital skills in spaces and areas where, it hasn't been easy to access. And so I think we've all kind of put our weight behind this machine to tap into our corporate black books and to say, which are the schools and regions in the country that need the skills the most? How can we call out and partner out with corporates to say, what is your CSI strategy? Do you have one? If you don't have one, let us give you a vehicle, right? And I think in giving them a vehicle, it helps us, I think, to reach our goal. And really that is, making accessible to young kids in location, access to, digital content repositories that ordinarily they wouldn't have. I think working with the ministry, in accelerating, I think, digital libraries, making sure that schools are getting access to the technology that they need. And so, I think our play has been to engage with schools. I mean, I've started engaging in schools in the Port Elizabeth area, and that's purely because I'm from PE. And so for me, it feels like I'm coming full circle in helping back and giving back to the communities that made me who I am, albeit I've been in Joburg for 15 years.
And what is the relationship with the Cisco Networking Training Academy? Is there any relationship there? And
yes.
If there is, what is the Cisco Networking Academy? What is it doing in South Africa? How can people participate in it?
Sure. So the Cisco, as we call it, NetAcad. So the Cisco Networking Academy is really an academy that, one, I think we've used it as a vehicle to create more opportunities and jobs. So our role has to be to train trainers that go into TVET colleges, or alternatively partnering up with universities that have the appetite to include Cisco, certification and content into their curriculums. And so what we've done subsequently is working with the Department of Higher Education, to ensure that, one, we're getting access to those spaces. But I mean, look, we also help them to drive their agenda around 4IR. And really what it is, it's a program for undergrads, if you will. And they've got access to, to Cisco content, and then they will eventually then go and write their exams to become Cisco qualified. So whether that is in network engineering, whether it is, some of our cloud-based solutions, but it really is, it's a good segue and a good entryway, for juniors coming into the space, I think, to learn the basics of technology, to learn the basics of some basic coding languages like Python, for example. And so we have a massive, directory of people we have trained that go into these spaces, into these colleges, and to offer those skills.
Great, and we see that probably holding.
What do you want to go first, and then we'll come to Dr. Jerry after you? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. I think probably still honing in what George was talking about with your learning academy. We see that it's actually quite huge, and the success and the impact that it has done especially in Africa. When we bring it back home, it's actually quite exceptional, and more so in Nigeria. I think Nigeria has ripped more benefits than any other African country. So can you just share with us, like, what is it that Nigeria is also getting it right, and then so that other African countries can actually get to learn from that and see how we actually get to increase the participation in that program from other countries as well.
Sure. I love that question, and you're absolutely correct. I mean, I think the uptake from a West African perspective has been tremendous. I think a big part of that is just from a cultural perspective. So, West Africa have a very different cultural educational nuance than I think East and South, in the sense that, they have a thriving, I think, entrepreneurial spirit. And so what the Net Academy allows is that once we train you, you can essentially go and set up your own Net Acad. So I think from an entrepreneurial perspective, there's a greater appetite in that space than I think we're seeing in East and certainly in sub-Saharan. And I think that's why you're seeing, I think, that differentiate in some of those numbers is that, these are folks who come in with the intention of opening up their own Net Acad and not necessarily being skills facilitators within another institution. Which I mean, of course, on this end of the continent, I think we are blessed with a bit more variety than they do.
Great, thanks.
Doc, over to you.
Thanks. Yes, thanks, Andisa. This when our chief host introduced this segment, he said we're talking about human resources management and development 101. Mm-hmm. What we're talking about seems to be quite high up there because of your experience. I just want us to come back to the profession once more. Not that we're talking outside the profession, we're definitely talking about some of the things that we should be adding. Let me ask this question. To get to the level where Andisa is today, if I'm a newbie in the human resources management and development field, what are the steps that have led you to be here, to be integrated into the business? What do you think an HR professional should be doing to position themselves such that they are such an influential player, strategic player in their organization? What are the things that create that credibility for an HR professional?
Sure, absolutely. I love that question, Doc. I mean, I think the first thing, maybe before I get to the laundry list, I'll try and keep it short and sweet. I think it's important, I think, for us in our fraternity to understand that, our role really is, we are fueling the future of the, a connection economy. Right, that's the space we're moving in, and so you have to be people-centric. And I think whilst that's the epicenter of what you do, I think it's important, I think, that you gain perspective into your growth through the lens of the business. And so whilst I'm designated an office, it tends to be one I rarely sit in, is the reality, unless I'm really dealing with highly confidential matters. So and not purely because maybe it's a me thing, but it certainly is a skill I try to transfer to my mentees. When I say, when you join any organization, it serves you well to have the spirit of curiosity. Be curious. So come in, know what you know, but come in and work on what you don't know. And so the reason for me, I've been able, I think, to move between all these industries and somewhat sound very well versed, and thank you for pointing that out and being gracious, is I really come in and I immerse myself, right? And I really understand, is it a service business? Is it a product business? What is it that we do? I think my strategy and my go-to has always been that, especially when we talk about talent acquisition and bringing people in, I don't share the philosophy that, we should be recruiting, we should be screening for skill. I hire for skill. And, so it's important, I think, that we separate ourselves from the practices that we have inherited, right, from the past. We're moving towards, a very different space. And so it's important that the starting point is the business. that you spend at least the first 90 days as a new HR person sitting on the floor, listen to what's going on around you, the teams that you are supporting, who do they roll up into the organization, the function they rolls up into, what part do they play in the strategy? Because once you understand those things, then it becomes a little less daunting and perhaps a little easier, I think, for you to then as a professional to offer, the full suite of the HR offering that we have as what I like to call an ace up our sleeve. So it is important that we entrench ourselves, but it is really important to have a spirit and just a natural curiosity. And that for me has really served me well.
Wow, just if I can follow up on that one, from a human resources development point of view, will you say that it's almost a must that find somebody that understands the function of human resources, but then they have to learn the business that they are coming into before they actually practice their HR function? It's almost like this is becoming a must, but we don't always get it right because perhaps we overemphasize only the people side, the functions, human resources, but this happens in a particular context, in a particular industry with its own dynamics. Is that how you have approached your own development into the function as an executive?
Absolutely. I mean, until this day, I'm very involved in a lot of HR communities and fraternities. I speak on a weekly basis to my peers who come from very, very different places, and I'm always open to learnings, right? And to learn how they do things, and for me, being able to take those learnings and maybe hyper localize them for my industry in a way that makes sense, that it's bite-sized, that I can align up to my own strategy. So to your point, I mean, I think we've moved away from the world where you come in and you're just a functional specialist, right? And we're seeing a lot of that kind of fall away, where the expectation is really just around being a solid generalist. So I think have some functionality to you, but certainly I think that the growth curve that we're seeing, and I think as we look to the future of work, requires us to be generalists.
Generalists, I like that. In 2020, the whole world looked to HR because we got hit by the pandemic, and before that, HR was part of the organization. But in 2020, I think HR practitioners earned their kudos. What was Cisco's experience?
Gosh, maybe before I answer that question, because I think context is important, maybe let me just take a moment just to curate the space a little. A couple of years ago, I went to a conference, probably about 5 years ago, and I listened to a gentleman from Deloitte called Josh Bersin. And he spoke about the big reset. And this is 5 years ago. Little did he know that that would be required a little further closer to the future. And essentially, my three takeaways, from Josh's remarks were: one, we needed to reset work, right? So how do we make the digital workplace thrive in the future? So that was one. The second thing he spoke about, I think, was to reset budgets, right? Simplification. So doing less with less, but also making work easier. And the third thing he spoke about was a reset of leadership and the importance of empathy and understanding. And I use that as a backdrop, perhaps to my answer to you, and perhaps to expand a little bit on the context, right? Is that we've just finished off one of the biggest growth decades in history. Right. If we look back to where we were 11, 12 years ago, coming off the 2008 financial crises, we've spent the last 10 years talking about digital transformation, future of the skills. We've seen the job and stock markets explode, CEOs becoming stinking rich, our companies making enough out of their stocks, to give back to shareholders. And maybe, like really just a healthy, GDP growth across all markets. Now, and I'll get around to answering you, but I really think the context is important. And I think with that also, we then saw with this hyper growth, I think the challenges that come with hyper growth, which was, a heightened level of anxiety. We've seen people more suicidal, stressed, lifestyle related illnesses. That have come up on the surge in communities and maybe in age groups that didn't necessarily experience these things, and that's all been indicators from this great success, right? Which first world problems, one might say, but I think and using that as a caveat to answer your question, I mean, I think for me it's the pandemic and just sort of where we are and what it's taught us is that we needed to reset our priorities. Right. So whilst I think our customers are, at the center of who we are, but our people are, right? We've had these conversations around, technology, is the future and blah, blah, blah. And those are all great. Or every company will become a tech company. I don't necessarily agree with that sentiment because I don't think technology is the only answer. I think people are the answer. Now, the difference between these two things is that it's innovation is the differentiator. So for us, it's been whilst our, how do we reset our expectations around our people and how we grow our people and how we leverage some of the agility that we use on our products to use that same, leverage for our people. So that's the one thing. The second thing is just resetting our priorities. And really just kind of, digging deeper into our strategy and really leveraging, the full extent and breadth of our channel. And so part of our broader strategy from an expansion and growth perspective has also to partner up with SMMEs, because the reality is that we're all in the same storm, we're just in different boats. But if we're all going to ride out the storm as a collective, as a human race, we need each other. So, it doesn't help Cisco to be a multi-billion-dollar, a business when our SMMEs, in our growing markets, aren't doing so great. So we've had to reset our priorities from a strategy perspective. So that's the second point. And I think the third point just speaks to this hybrid world of work, right? We all are now in different offices and homes, etc. And for us, it's been to reset how we spend our time. Right. We speak a lot about, the future of work and hybrid and some people being at work, some at the office. But, so how do we cleverly reset our time and how do we enable our people to reset their time so that their priorities as well from a work and a home perspective, that, that we all find what that sweet spot is. And really, I think anything else that the pandemic has taught us is the power of connection. And so for us, we just want to, to focus on those three big resets. I think as we look into the future. I know I gave you a mouthful, George. My apologies.
I think it was a mouthful, Andisa, but a much needed mouthful information to share, because like you said, our context is quite important, right? Maybe also, like as you were saying that we're saying that technology is, like we're saying, technology is not the answer, but our people is the answer. And I think that's one of the things that George and I were talking about earlier, to say, what becomes the differentiator is our people, how we manage our people, how we treat our people, and the support that we actually provide our people in the working environment to make them succeed. And organizations only succeed because of people. If you can probably briefly share high level, nothing in detail, what is it that Cisco Africa has put in place for its people during this time and during this pandemic, just to ensure that they are geared up to deal with the challenges, they are geared up to perform, and they are geared up in supporting the business to achieve its results. What has been the people focus for you in the last 12 months?
Sure. Look. I think this last 12 months I think many organizations have been building up towards resilience, right? As I said, we've all been in the storm, but in different boats. And I think for us, it's been twofold. I think for us as a tech leader is for us being marrying technology and people to fuel an inclusive future for all. And that certainly is the language we're using when we're engaging with our partners in our ecosystem, just around, I think, identifying opportunities. And I touched on this a little earlier. around identifying opportunities for that growth and expansion for all of us. So that's one. I think the other thing that's maybe been a big ticket item in conversation is just been around culture. I think we understand, whilst our job as tech partners is to enable and to drive digital strategy, but we also recognize that culture could be at risk, right? Culture is at risk in this world that we're living in, and I think in managing the nuances between people who will eventually go back into the office and people who will continue to work offline. In fact, some of the preliminary findings from a recent customer survey we did probably about a month ago, I believe, we're starting to see the indicators that 98% of our customers have all said that moving forward, at least in every single meeting, there will be one virtual attendee. So when we speak of culture, then doubling down and taking some of that insight, what are some of the things that we're doing from a product perspective to further enable culture, and I think not to destroy culture. And I think for me, I think that there's a lot of exciting work still needing to be done. I don't think we necessarily have all the answers. I think we've trialed a lot of things, and that's been the beauty of this time, right? Because the value chain and the cycle of coming up with new things has shortened, right? We didn't have the luxury of piloting things. We had to all get into action and to find solutions and things that are working. And so for us, even conversations like this for me are some of the scaffolding towards that work and towards the direction we're going in. But I think we've been very intentional about supporting our people. We've been very intentional about recalibrating our EAP program to ensure that it is speaking to the needs of this current world that we're in. So we've done a massive rehaul. If I look back to the Section 189s that we conducted last year, we really took a very different approach, conscious culture being at the center of that. We were supporting not only the individuals who were impacted, but as well as their families through, partnerships with the likes of Randstad, and their global offering that provides placement programs, revamping people's CVs, emotional wellness and that sort of thing. And we've seen a great, I think, turnaround in the sense that a lot of the people that were impacted via Section 189 actually eventually got absorbed elsewhere in our ecosystem. So essentially, we haven't lost that skill as a channel. We've just rerouted some of those resources somewhere else, and they still are in a position to still drive our strategy and to drive, I think, revenue lines.
Yeah.
That's very interesting, Andisa.
Yeah, carry on, Dr. Kule.
Okay. No, I was saying very interesting, Andisa, because the whole being on this same boat, rather being in the same ship but on different boat is an interesting way to look at what we're experiencing as a world and as organizations. I just wanted to ask you, when you look into the future, we're still in the pandemic, we're still faced with this uncertainty. And I think from a people management side of the business, there is really, the uncertainty is resulting in decisions sometimes, I don't know what your experience is, decisions not being made, people being ambivalent about going forward. What do you see for yourself and your organization? What are you finding with this cloud that still hangs over the world?
Yeah.
In short, what's your prognosis?
Doc, I think the world has been, we've gone through quite a traumatic experience as the human race. I think it's important for us to recognize survivor's guilt, right? We've had quite a lot of us lose our loved ones. And I think with anything that's traumatic, PSTD, kind of really kicks in, and really there's been survival skills. So to your point, I think some of the challenges of people, being a little less committal from a future perspective, has been a derivative, and it's come from, that survival skill, So I've survived, nothing happening to me that's fatal in the first, second wave. We're now in the third wave, so how much of the future can I plan for? But I think for us in our fraternity, I think this presents a really good opportunity, I think, for us to set ourselves apart as a good partner to our business. I think now is the time where we need to be leaning into the listening tools that we've had for so long, and not run surveys for the sake of maybe, ticking the box or just measuring temperature. But I really think to take those insights and to really apply them and use that as a leapfrog and as a springboard, I think, to change. And I think now more than ever, business is really eager to hear from us. And so now is the time for us, I think, to position ourselves as trusted people partners. And I think a lot of companies are blessed with, a lot of, access to their analytics, or certainly, I think, tools that are out there that allow you to listen in, and I think to take what your people want, and to start putting together really compelling human practice business cases for business to consider. And so for us, and Wonyo and the likes, is I think now is the time, I think, for us to really branch out, and to really think differently around people.
Has HR been?
Thank you for that. I appreciate.
Has HR been challenged in terms of where it chooses to be in? Because for the first time, perhaps, we found ourselves being called over from all areas and all levels, even the executives. What has HR learned from this? When you are HR business partner, the understanding is that you're going to focus very much on business and that small unit. But when the whole organization, the whole world is affected, it's like in times of war, even the reservists are called forward to come and reinforce. And what has been, people like Dave Ulrich, who tend to write a lot about emerging HR trends, must be hard at work. I'm expecting to receive a lot of new textbooks talking about HR the new way. Otherwise, then we haven't learned anything if we're just going to continue the same old way. The models are changing, the structures are flattened, the offices have been broken down. It's no longer cool to say I've got a corner office with a secretary. You just have to be anywhere where you are expected. Are we ready for this? Are the universities changing the syllabuses? The academies, I can go on and on,
Well, Sam, I can't speak, I think, for our friends in academia, but I think what I can categorically tell you is that they are definitely leaning in, and I think having conversations with us. I was just having a conversation the other day with good folks from UNISA, right? And so I think academia is starting to lean into corporate in terms of understanding the things that are happening on the ground, and to support your point, for that very reason that the HR practices are being rehauled and they're changing. And I think for us, the crux of it is really just to focus on the employee, the moments that matter in an employee life cycle. And to rethink and to redesign what those are. As we move into this world of flattening and collapsing traditional hierarchies and traditional roles, moving into the space of project of networks or network projects, and ultimately then moving into working in dynamic teams or super teams, as we're starting to call them, is really for us, I think, to look into the future and understand that in 20 years from now, the only people that will be full-time employees will be C-suite executives. everyone else, the rest of us, will all operate in this gig economy. So what does that mean from an HR perspective, right? So how do we start recalibrating and I think moving the motion of the wheel? And the time is now. And if anything else, opportunity that COVID has presented us with is to accelerate those things, right? I mean, these are things, again, I spoke earlier about, our conversations around digital transformation. We've been talking about this stuff for 10 years. Now is the time, I think, to fast track those conversations. And I think to accept that reality. And I think also just to take a different view on, the conversation between talent and experience or skill. Right. So what does the business really need? So, it's the skill relative to the talent. And in some instances, the talent will be more important than the skill. But I think we have to be open to those conversations.
Dr. Kule, you have a conference theme there. You have a theme
Yes,
for
most
your...
definitely. Most definitely, yes, we do.
Good stuff. Sure. George, you wanted to follow up?
I'm looking at the time, and is it about the time we wrap up, or can I introduce a question? We might run over your time.
Let's spend 6 more minutes.
Excellent. In fact, you're talking about workspaces. I was reading that the Google CEO is talking about getting people back into the workplace and operating much more the hybrid, but with people in the office, because according to them, that's where the hard conversations happen. Cisco's position on that? What is that?
No pressure at all, George. No pressure. Look. I mean, I think we are starting to gear ourselves up, towards moving back into some of our larger campuses around the globe. Those conversations and those plans are well underway. I think also we are giving our people a little bit more autonomy in choosing, how that hybrid world is going to look like for them. So for someone like I've got youngish kids, and I've opted to I think to be a hybrid, right? So I'll spend two days in the office, and maybe 3 days at home. We don't know how that's truly going to work. And so we haven't taken a hard stance into it. I think for now we've kind of opened up the floodgates of autonomy to say, I think people need to make that decision. Again, it goes back to the resets, right? Resetting, how much time we spend where, resetting our priorities. And I think also the broader conversation is also looking at our corporate real estate, right? And I think assessing whether or not we do need, all those massive campuses around the globe. And I mean, there's complexity to that conversation, right? Because we can't have it, a Cisco, in a silo. In some of them we have a landlord to account to. There's legal obligations, etc. So it's, those are difficult ones to call. But yeah, I mean, I think we're taking a much more active approach in revisiting the conversation around our corporate real estate.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. What do we do with the plethora of office spaces that we have as organizations, and I mean, those things drove the economy because they employed people. So what are we going to do in the future? I think George is and it's an interesting question that we are faced with.
Collaboration, though, Doc. But Doc, look, yeah. So what we have seen the last couple of years is, if you look at the model of WeWork as an example, right? So WeWork was to provide an office space for really small businesses to come in and to collaborate. So floor by floor, they would place companies that either you operate within the same space or otherwise complementary to each other to encourage more collaboration. And I'd like to imagine, I think large corporates will also start looking perhaps bringing in some of the SMMEs that are in their respective channels, or otherwise other smaller businesses that they've been supporting, and rather to have everyone in one space than in 100 different spaces. Again, that cuts down on on time and commuting. So if you had to go to Dimension Date, if you're a salesperson, you have to go here, then everywhere else. You've spent 3 hours of your day behind the wheel driving. What is your time in a commute going to look like when you've got two of those individuals in the same building as you? So I think we have to rethink opportunities, because that really is where the sweet spot is.
I see business opportunities there, especially that model of WeWork needs to be refined. You can imagine we will need the spaces that are digitally equipped, to can do these connectivities. And I don't imagine companies giving budgets to staff to equip their home offices to meet the standards. I don't think people will want to turn their home offices into digital hubs. It will take away that beauty of being home and relaxed. So, but I could see regional or local hubs where you say there's a Cisco hub there. If you want to connect the Cisco world, you drive a couple of kilometers to the place, and when you get there, you'll find the WeWork type of infrastructure, the care that they give you, maybe even the washing your car while you are busy doing business, and
in fact,
preparing a snack for yourself.
We've done that in Cape Town. In Cape Town, we've closed down our Cisco office actually before the pandemic. So we're currently working out of a WeWorkspace. On our floor, we've got access to a lot more, people in our ecosystem. So it is working. It'll work in some spaces, and I think some spaces it's not necessarily conducive. But I think where you have satellite offices, you can certainly save, on corporate real estate fees, and figure out a WeWork, or otherwise even a what's the other one, Regenesis, or no, there's another one. I apologize, I've forgotten. But we've seen the upside from a Cisco perspective in Cape Town. We've been in that office now for 15 months or 18, give or take. And it's worked.
But this is calling for colleagues. This is calling for serious thinking, innovation and creativity to move forward. And that's why I think to have somebody like yourself coming from technology space, it's quite helpful, to restart the thinking. Bonnie, I see Bonnie is deep in thoughts. It looks like in that HR modules, we need to build one big module that is digitalization of HR.
Of course. So, like, I think having to listen to Andisa, it's actually quite eye-opening, and I think the learnings are actually quite great. And I'm also I'm deep in thoughts, thinking where I am, where I'm going, what contributions I could make with my colleagues in the fraternity, But I think we will actually hear more when we come back from the news bulletin, and then we can take this conversation further, and let's see how we go back and actually impact our workplaces as human resources practitioners.
Yeah, perhaps before we do that, can we just reflect a little bit? What issues do you think we have raised in this first segment that we would like to deepen when we come back? Dr. Gule, from the HR professional body.
I think what Andisa has really given us here is just the versatility with which HR practitioners must present in the workplace. The familiarity that they must have, or the intimacy that they need to have with their own businesses, their customers, and their people. That it is critical. I normally talk about you need to go back to the floor, call it the shop floor. You need to know how your company makes its buck, makes its money, and how it loses its money, so that you can plug those areas and bring the talent that will help it to really plug where you are loss making, so that you can become profitable. I think also what he has said is what he has really been telling us about is to understand the whole ecosystem. We no longer operate in our different silos in our sectors, but it's a whole ecosystem, and we need to understand that and understand how we can milk that ecosystem to the benefit of all, the abundance mindset that we bring to the workplace. I know that in the next segment, I want to talk to Andisa about growing that abundance mindset, about rebuilding those humane workplaces, because I think the new dispensation will require us to do that. So I want to push that a little bit further. But yeah, she has given us quite a bit. And I think also, what kind of workers are we? In other words, what's our purpose? How do we see that purpose of being in a role? It's not just about, I'm here to earn a salary. I mean, what the stuff that she has spoken about this morning, today, is really, it goes beyond the four walls of a building, of your workplace, into society. What are you doing? What are you contributing to society? What legacy do you want to leave? So I find it quite exciting. And I think I'm well fed right now, but I want more. I want more. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, thank you so much, George.
Yeah, I'm hearing innovation. I'm hearing agility. I'm hearing a different future, and it's for us to reimagine that and create an environment where the principles that we relied on yesterday, we bury them. And what do we do now? And that's exciting. I'm really excited about the next segment, and also the business plans from Cisco. Your strategy talks about creating a new world, literally, and let's hear more about that. I'm really keen to hear a lot more about that.
Wow. It looks like Cisco is seeing more opportunities, while some of us are just seeing the end of the road. But I will expect it from a technology company, you know. I mean, if you look at the financial results of all technology companies, they are going up, and because of the uptake of the platforms, ourselves included. Even platform like this, it's just a simple, small way of showing this is where we are going to. But it could be exciting opportunities for countries that have to catch up with the rest of the world. And lastly, from my side, Andisa, I kept on asking myself, where is she getting this energy from? Because you have got so much energy, so much passion, even when you talk about things. Sometimes people, we tend to forget that you are talking about HR. But anyway, we'll hear more about that when we come back. Yeah.